The journey of a patient can be very, very brutal. You go through chemotherapy, you go through radiotherapy, you go through immunotherapy. So one of the questions I get asked the most is, what does it all mean? There's so many different things out there that the patient really doesn't understand. To find out more answers, I was invited into the Rutherford Cancer Centres, as they're one of the leading private clinics in the UK and at the forefront of innovation and treatment plans. The Rutherford vision is to transform cancer care by providing personalised and holistic support. I met with Rutherford's CEO Mike Moran to find out more about the Rutherford story and discovered a personal family inspiration.
Yeah, the inspiration for me was really my brother got breast cancer, and somebody many months previously had presented a business plan for me to look at, and we decided to set up this network of cancer centres with a full pathway, so imaging, good diagnostics, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, immunotherapy and high energy proton beam therapy. We founded the company in 2015, and the we in that is myself and Professor Carol Sikora, and we set out to build this network of cancer centres around the country. Yeah, my brother's still with us. He's still ugly, but he's around, he's kicking, and oddly enough, on this site, exactly where we are, was his comprehensive school. It was Paddington Comprehensive School.
So, what made you bring proton beam therapy to the UK?
For me, it was about building a network of cancer centres, not just a single. But we're also broadening the use of proton beam therapy in particular, and now here in Liverpool we'll have the latest MR-Linac. So we want to be on the cutting edge of developments in cancer.
Proton beam therapy, MR-Linac. This brings us to one of the main reasons for our visit here today, the technology. To try to make sense of it, I chatted with Kevin Dooley, Rutherford's head of marketing.
Now, to simplify what proton beam therapy is, it's radiotherapy. It's a form of external radiotherapy. So if you were to take this as a target area in the body, radiotherapy can blast the whole area and around it as well. And unfortunately, that can sometimes damage the healthy tissue. What proton beam therapy does, because of the way it's been designed, is very targeted. So it pinpoints the cancer and it releases all of its energy at that particular point in there. So there's much less damage to the healthy tissue around the cancer. So that helps to reduce the side effects. Now, proton beam therapy is very suitable for hard to reach cancers in the body, so the head and neck being a primary one of those. So radiotherapy does go through the body and has this exit. With proton beam therapy, all the energy is released at that one particular moment. It's getting down to that finite level of detail to target a cancer.
So without getting too bogged down with science, let's take a quick look at some of the hardware Rutherford have available for cancer patients.
So the machine behind me is an MRI linear accelerator, or we tend to call it a LINAC, an MR-Linac. It's a conventional radiotherapy machine. However, this machine combines that conventional treatment with an MRI scanner. What this allows us to do is deliver radiotherapy normally, but using MRI to make sure that we are getting the right spot. So this is a conventional LINAC, a radiotherapy linear accelerator. So the treatment will come out of the head of the machine here. The patient would be lying on the couch here. The radiographers would use this control panel to raise and lower the bed and move the bed in and out. And then the panels that you see on the machine here allows us to take a type of CT scan. So the patient will see this side of the machine, but behind the doors, this is the workings of the machine, including what we call the gantry. So when we're moving the machine around the patient outside, all of this will move in the back as well. Radiotherapy can be delivered in a variety of different ways. You've got conventional radiotherapy on a linear accelerator. We can also deliver treatment using an MRI linac, like the machine behind me, which also uses photon radiotherapy, or we can use a proton beam therapy.
Okay, so here we are. Here's the actual proton machine, the robotic table and couch that the patient lies on. This part obviously houses the treatment machine, and this is the only area the patient will see.
I can't visualise this moving, so that then moves.
So the whole floor moves, and the actual
so the
floor moves. Yes, but here it's the couch that does a lot of the rotating movements. So the radiographers will put the patient on the couch, but the couch itself can be rotated at all different angles. The lasers are set up in the room to guide us from a physics and dosimetry point of view. So the lasers really are an external guide for us actually putting the patient in the correct position.
As if this huge machine isn't impressive enough, I took a sneak peek to see what the empty room looks like before this technology has even been delivered.
So this is the entrance to what will be the proton beam therapy machine when it's finished. This part of the building is 4 stories, so you come in on your first story. The concrete panels that you can see in the ceiling are removable, so when the machine is ready to come on site, the concrete panels will be removed and the machine is winched in through a panel in the ceiling.
And here's how to build your very own proton beam therapy centre.
The reason why we have to have so many floors is the machine itself weighs an awful lot. The gantry component of the machine weighs several tons. You have to have a counterweight on the other side. For the counterweight to be effective, it needs this clearance that you can see here to move around behind the scenes. All of these 3 treatments give the same success rate, the same outcome. So it's important to note that proton beam therapy and radiotherapy treatment on an MR linac isn't the right treatment for everybody. And this doesn't mean that there aren't other radiotherapy options available, but that these 2 options may not be the most suitable for a patient at the particular time.
As a lifelong patient of our wonderful NHS, I was keen to understand Rutherford's relationship with their patients. Mike explained his philosophy.
You know, we can talk about raising £250 million to build this network. All of that means nothing if we don't treat people properly. And I see my brother coming through the door, or my sister, my cousin, my auntie, my uncle, and this is about people. So the first thing is we have to see people before we see patients, and we see people before we see cancer.
Well, it's central to the whole ethos of Rutherford. It's about putting the patient first, but that patient is a person. That person has a name, they have a date of birth, they have family, they have friends, they have a situation. So that stems all the way up from the top with our CEO, Mike Moran, all the way through to our receptions and bookings and greetings team who look after those people as they walk through the doors.
So when the patient walks through the door, it's a very welcoming environment with staff who are happy to help them all the time, 24/7. The way I see patients is as if they were my family member, as if this is something that you're going through in your family and you just have to put yourself in those shoes. I know that I would want the best treatment pathway, the most smooth pathway possible.
We have a luxury here in that because we have more time, it is a lot easier to fall into that culture, and it's a lot easier to spend the time getting to know the person in front of you, whether that be hobbies, interests, whatever it may be. I would hope, you know, I know their name, they know my name, they know I've got a dog, whatever it may be. By the end of treatment, you do see them as a person and not a patient.
One of the important conversations I had was with a patient who'd been treated, left us, and there was a follow-up, and I met up I said to him, you know, how are you doing now? It was really odd because he said, I missed the Rutherford hug.
Joan, tell me a little bit about your role here at the Rutherford Centre.
My role with the Rutherford Centre is I'm a doctor by Macmillan. So we use, I was very involved with Macmillan previously, and we use all of the Macmillan information and support available from them, including in particular the holistic needs assessment.
How does the Rutherford look at the caregiver?
So we've designed our centres to be patient-centric. So that takes into account those families, that takes into account those friends. The carers are part of that support mechanism that helps a person to get through a cancer journey. They go through an emotional time working and supporting their loved ones, and we have to make sure that we recognise that.
So we open the supportive care for the carers, the family and the patient.
We have to have a holistic approach to this. So everybody focuses on the patient, but they forget the carer. And the two should go hand in hand. And you've got to make sure as well that we offer support to the family unit that's supporting that patient, because that is also important.
As I look around, it's obvious to me that Rutherford offer an exceptional level of patient care and are indeed the only network of UK centres able to offer proton beam therapy. I wanted to know more about their collaboration with the NHS.
So we already have NHS contracts for imaging, chemotherapy. We're on a NHS framework as well, so the NHS SBS contract, and any trust can buy services from us from anywhere in England and Wales. However, that COVID is a catalyst for change, and we need to look at the delivery of our healthcare. I think it's pretty grim if hospitals are just closed down and just one single ailment going through their COVID. So we need to look at how we can use the independent sector better and have a seamless pathway, because actually for the person coming through for treatment, it doesn't matter if it's private or NHS, they just want their treatment.
I'm still concerned about people who fall through the cracks, the people that can't afford to pay private, who are unable to get referrals from the NHS for whatever reason. These people deserve a chance. What options are open to them?
Yeah, so we've already established the Chief Executive's Contingency Fund, and we've already treated 2 or 3 patients who wouldn't have had access to proton beam therapy through that fund. More broadly now, we've just launched something called Rutherford Direct. Rutherford Direct is a membership scheme of the Rutherford. It's backed by an insurer and underwritten by a Lloyd's underwriter. And the idea of this is members pay a monthly fee to be a member. It's something like £1 a day or less than a coffee at the higher end. And after 90 days, if that member gets cancer or has a cancer diagnosis, they can come in to us immediately for a second opinion, additional diagnostics and treatment.
The whole element of being a private cancer centre brings with it a number of perceptions. So to get over that, a number of procedures were put in place to take away from that. And one of those is the fact that our treatment team never talk about finance or costs or money or who's paying the bill. So we're registered with, like, I think it's about 30 of the major health insurance companies in the UK and beyond. And that relationship means that if a person has health insurance, then their whole pathway is looked after.
One thing I was keen to understand at the Rutherford was how receptive are they to the patient's voice? Do they hear what their customers or clients have to say?
There should only ever be one voice in the choice, and that's the patient's. Everything else should be information. So these are the options available for you, and the patient's voice is the most important and it should be heard.
I think it's fair to say that finally the professionals recognise that the patient knows best, and we see the patient as a whole person, not just as a tumour site, which I'm probably sad to say historically might have been the case. And the emotional support is probably one of the greatest needs that patients ask for.
The more that we can do to improve their quality of life, that quality of life is paramount to what we want to achieve, because it's about ensuring that people have a life and they have a life to lead, and that's what we want to help them do.
What does the future hold for the Rutherford Centres?
So in terms of our future, we will continue to invest in our business. We'll build more cancer centres, but we'll also build a network of diagnostic centres as well, because if we can get the diagnosis right early, you can save a lot more lives. I wish we were in every major city and people could just travel locally for proton beam therapy.
How do you work with the local communities?
So in terms of our relationship with the community generally, it stems all the way up from when we start building our centres. We work with the NHS, we work with charities and groups like the Swallows, like yourself, and others, particularly with Head and Neck with the Swallows. I mean, you are the best sort of organisation to work with to reach those people. What I loved about the event in Brighton was the whole personal feeling to it. It didn't feel like a conference. It didn't feel like the big events I've gone to in the past. It actually felt like people talking to people about their cancer.
So, what role do you think the Swallows plays here at the Rutherford?
Without doubt, head and neck patients of all cancer patients have I would almost say, the most gruelling courses of treatment. And it needs a focused charity, which Swallows is, to actually support those patients. Without doubt, having a charity like that to be able to signpost the patients to for support is excellent.
So at the start of this journey, I wanted to understand more about proton therapy and how it would benefit patients going through this brutal treatment. Maybe the NHS needs to look to collaborate more with the private sectors and the private clinics that have these machines. We need to look at a way of making this happen. For the average man in the street, proton is not available, and it should be available to everybody. I'd like to thank Mike Moran and his team for making us very welcome over the few days that we were at his centres. And I just hope one day that proton beam therapy and the services that you offer is available to an awful lot more people.